Today on the CEO Barbecue, we're looking for everything, really, including the meaning of life, but mostly zinc, silver, copper, and gold in Peru, together with Tinka Resources. If you want a bullet point summary of this and all the other CEO barbecues in your inbox once a week, go to resourcetalks.com and subscribe to our free newsletter. Now, although the company you're about to hear from has not paid us for the production of this interview, you should still not treat this video as research. Research is conducted by reading the company's official filings, which you can find on setterplus.ca. In any case, please only watch this if you absolutely know what you're doing. This interview is intended only for experienced junior mining speculators because mineral exploration, development, and mining is an extremely tough business where failure is the norm and should be the expectation. This is going to be a conversation that is general and impersonal in nature, and it is also going to contain forward-looking statements. I am not a licensed financial advisor, and my business sells content-producing services, which also makes me biased. Although this company has not paid for the production of this interview, it doesn't mean they won't become a client in the future. They might. So before continuing on, please talk to an independent investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital might be at risk. If you're not 100% sure you understand 100% of the disclaimers I just showed you, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said therein. That all said, Tinka is, as I indicated, a polymetallic story. It's focused on advancing the Ayahuelca project in the Pasco region of Peru, where they're currently getting ready to drill a gold-copper target about 100 kilometers south of Antamina. Ayahuelca is an advanced stage asset where a 2024 resource outlined a large zinc system with additional tin and silver zones, and that's why I call it a polymetallic story. So many different metals in there that we'll talk about, of course, later on. The zinc zone came in at just under 60 million tons of zinc, spread almost 50-50 between indicated and inferred at respectively 5.8% and 4.2% average grade. The tin zone shows just under 15 million tons, though mostly in inferred with both average grades at around, call it 0.75%. And again, there was a smaller silver resource on top of that as well. The 2024 PEA suggests a 21-year underground operation with a post-tax NPV8 of $434 million and a 26% IRR on the $382 million initial capex, which the study says can be paid back in just under 3 years. Though, to be fair, the prices used for that study are rather low relative to where the metal prices are today. Of course, these economics are preliminary in nature, hence the PEA, and they rely on other assumptions such as metallurgical recovery, smelter terms, weighted average cost of capital, and so on. So do keep that in mind. But I'll also be asking more about this PEA and the plans for potentially growing it from here on out, as well as what the risks and challenges in that process might be later on in the conversation. Now, what caught my eye and why this interview is happening in the first place is because Brandon McDonald, whom I've known for a couple of years now, he led Fireweed Zinc at the time. So Fireweed Zinc, how the time flies, eh? But so he led Fireweed Zinc at the time, and he's the one who got the Lundins into that story. And so about a month and a half ago, him and Michael Horner, who is the ex-CFO of Adriatic Metals, joined the board at Tinka. They did a 5-for-1 share consolidation and also closed an over 14 million Canadian dollar financing. So that's kind of the thing that got it on my radar. Why that's happening and what's really going on is hopefully, again, something Brandon will be telling me more about later on in the conversation. Tinka is listed as TK on the TSX Ventures Exchange, where the average 3-month volume is about 200,000 shares, though a recent uptick in trading has the 10-day volume at about 320,000. The stock's 52-week high is 62 cents and its 52-week low is 15 cents. Pretty aggressive run on some of the last trading sessions has Tinka at around 70 million Canadian dollars in market cap, and with just over 133.6 million shares outstanding today, this is a 54-cent stock with a 50 and a 200-day moving average at respectively 37 and 31.5 cents, which means the stock is now trading well above both of them, and so in a positive upward momentum. Moving on to the share structure, I see 27.7 million warrants, most of which at 40 cents and expiring in October of 2029. And there's a small chunk that expires next summer with a 75-cent strike price as well. Just over 8 million options, most of which also at 40 cents, but they don't expire until late 2030. And there are still some options, about 1.5 million that expire next summer as well, but they're not in the money before $1.25. All in all, the number of fully diluted shares is just under 170 million, meaning an increase of about 27% in shares outstanding could happen if all the dilutive securities get exercised, which would then result in about a 21% ownership dilution if, and that's always a big if, of course, but if all the dilutive securities get exercised. And of course, none of this accounts for potential dilution down the road, which is not unlikely given that this is a pre-revenue company that operates in a very capital-intensive industry. Talking about capital, there is... well, this is actually where I'd normally go over the latest financial statement, but given that the company just did a share consolidation as well as a big capital raise and is essentially under new leadership, I don't think the latest financial statement, which is from June 30, 2025, will be entirely representative. But the more important part is that they've got roughly 15 million Canadian in cash right now, and there's no long-term nor short-term debt. The 9-month operating expense were recorded at just under $1 million, with the largest part being salaries, director and officer compensation combined, professional fees too combined on top of that. And again, what the G&A will be from here on out, how much they'll spend on marketing and how much on drilling and so on, as well as how executive compensation is going to be determined, is hopefully something I can get more color on later on in this conversation. And as always, I would like to remind you to be cautious. Your capital may be at risk. Please visit centerplus.ca to view the company's financials for yourself. Now, for this to actually become a conversation, I'll have to shut up already. And Brandon, I'll give you the word here. But first of all, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a while since I formally came on.
It has been. I've been seeing you at conferences, and then you're always telling me that I should, watch this space. You're going to see what's coming. And in a sense, I thought you were done with Zinc, but it seems like Zinc's not done with you. So what's going on? What's your involvement here with the Tinka story? Because you call it a corporate reorganization, I believe, but is it an activist move, or why are you and Horner getting involved, and why now?
Yeah, I mean, not a coincidence that Horner and I are both coming from Zinc. Adriatic was probably more silver than zinc, but nonetheless, still pretty involved in the zinc space. When the bid came in from Dundee Precious for Adriatic, Michael reached out and said to me, reached out, we chat all the time, but he said to me, like, why can we do something with Tinka? We recognized that they were in a pretty rough spot at that time. Their third largest shareholder, which was a pretty substantial block, was a private equity fund called Sentient. Their fund was at end of life. They were in redemption period, and they were, for lack of a better way out, they were aggressively selling their position into the market. And of course, when if someone's an insider and they're doing that, it is entirely transparent what is happening, right? So unsurprisingly, a lot of people pulled their bids, thinking that Sentient would have to hit them at a lower price, and that's exactly what happened. So pre-consolidation, they effectively got sold down from 13-14 cents to as low as 3.5. The final day, Sentient dumped 72 million shares, I want to say, into the market. Right, so it's pretty ruthless, but it left a company with a really great project in a pretty challenging position, like with a really low valuation, yet without the confidence of the market. So Michael and I gathered some backers who had backed me at Fireweed and him at Adriatic, and put together a book and approached the Tinka board. I had known Graham Carmen, the CEO there, for quite some time. And we approached them and said, look, we've got at least 10 million in backing. We want to join the board, and we can inject this capital into there, and this is what we want to see. And would you be interested? And they said yes, right? So I would say it was pretty activist. It was definitely not a situation where we joined the board and then went looking for money. We actually had the money with us to approach them. So it was a different situation. I'd never done that before, and obviously the capital that backed us understood that the two of us knew a lot about zinc projects globally. And they believed us when we said that this was a real standout. For me personally, when Fireweed launched, went public in 2017, the gold standard for Zinc Junior in terms of valuation was Tinka, right? That was always the peer on our peer chart that we wanted to achieve the relative valuation of. They were doing great, and 2018 hit, the trade wars were kicked off, and like us, they were hammered. And I think the difference was the Fireweed managed to get our feet back underneath us, in large part because we got the Lundins help. And Tinka couldn't. And then that's true of a lot of different Zinc juniors who were riding high in 2017, 2018. But those other Zinc juniors didn't really have the quality project that we saw here. So let's put us where we are now, right? I'm exec chair, which means that I'm involved day to day. I try to stay out of operations unless I'm asked, right? I don't want to be a backseat driver on the minutia. That is really still Graham, the CEO's responsibility. But I'm there to really do more heavy lifting on capital markets and strategy, et cetera, which was an area that I think they recognized was a shortcoming.
So you're going to be on a lot of podcasts then?
Yes. Yeah. You'll never get rid of me.
That works well for me. You don't currently have any other executive well, you do actually with Commander.
Yeah, well, Commander and now Enduro. I'm chairman there, but I'm not an executive chair there. Right. And so that, people ask me, well, what's the difference? And I guess, I talk to Rob and Will at Enduro almost daily, right? But there's very little that gets left on my plate, right? At the end of the day, I'm non-exec. I provide them with the guidance and help they need, and then they go and execute. With Tinka, I'm a bit more involved, right? So I would actually take some stuff on and actually get it done, right? And take it fully off Graham's plate.
That's, you see capital markets. So I suppose, telling the story is part of that. Raising capital, sort of heavy lifting will still fall on you eventually when you have to do that. Is that kind of what your day-to-day is going to look like? Just essentially talking to people, hopefully a little less annoying than myself? Yeah.
Look, you haven't met some of the shareholders we deal with if you think you're on the more annoying end of the spectrum, but it's a lot of that. Yeah. Helping guide the strategy, and then communicating it, right? It's, you got to have a good strategy, and then you got to communicate that strategy and convince people to buy in. Yeah.
Skin in the game, you as newcomer to the story wouldn't have had any founder shares, but how many shares do you own right now, and what's the average price you've paid for these shares?
I put in $250,000 into the financing. I guess post rollback, that is a 27.5 cent share price. So whatever that math brings me to, is that just under $1 million? Or just over $1 million? I don't know what the math is. Something like that.
Yeah. That's fair.
I should probably know that. but and then I have a pretty, one of our asks was a pretty good grant of options for joining. So I have probably about 2 million options as well.
Oh, okay. Do you plan to increase your position in the market or future financings? And do you have kind of a target as to how exposed or how much exposure you want to have to Tinka, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a target. With both, Enduro, I'm about $200,000 deep as well, and so Tinka, I'm about $250,000 deeper, so slightly more. It's a slightly less speculative play. Maybe not quite the risk reward ratio, or less risk. But that seems to me to be about the right bite size given my personal net worth right now. I would definitely continue to follow on in additional financings as I did with Fireweed. Putting down another $200,000 might attract the hostility of my wife. We'll see. We have to be a little bit prudent. But I think, yeah, look, definitely continuing, and I think opportunistically in the market, if there's some sort of dislocation, right? Like you think, that sentient selling was a great example of a entirely irrational dislocation, like nothing to do with the project or anything or the jurisdiction or whatever, right? It's just a wholly irrational repricing. I think everyone needs to be aware that or watch out for those sort of things and pick it up when you can. And people who bought at the bottom there are sitting on a triple now already, right? 5 months later.
Just when your wife thought Zinc was done with you, Zinc pulls you back in. You might have to say that in an accent, but it wouldn't be fair because I'm actually stealing your joke. What's the rest of the insider ownership here from the perspective of directors and officers? Who owns what?
Yeah, Michael put in about 250,000 as well into the financing. Graham put in, I want to say, under half that, but still a good amount. There hasn't been a major inside block. I mean, this company has been around for a while, and I don't think anyone was there during the formation. So it's been, I recognize, probably a little underheld by management, right?
Well, given that, what would I put you then in total in terms of percentage? What I'm thinking, because given that you just joined, you do know or have an idea as to where the rest of the stock is what I'm thinking. What percentage of the company do you think is in what people like calling, strong hands? And I don't like that term, but I'm just thinking about how much of the stock can you track essentially?
Oh, we put, of the 40% of the stock is the recent financing, basically, right? And that was our list, very carefully curated. Mm-hmm. There is of that 14 million, maybe 500,000, maybe slightly more, is kind of randos, or not randos, but like people who weren't with us when we approached them. And we're not. I'm not going to approach someone with a bunch of, and then tie my reputation and my own capital to a company when I know I'm bringing in bad shareholders, right? So there's some big name funds in there who normally have much, much larger bite sizes, and some high net worths who backed me extensively at Fireweed that I know are good shareholders. That was a lesson. That was difficult to learn. Fireweed is my first time in the big chair, so to speak. And then there was a lot of tough lessons there. And I think one that I really learned was that shareholder quality is something that is so hard to identify and virtually impossible for a retail investor to spot, because you can't see the share registry, right? But it's tough, a bad shareholder registry, and you can fight that. You can fight those shareholders every step of the way on the way up, mm-hmm. right? And we know that for example, we're coming into a company that's down substantially. When we announced the financing and a consolidation, we turned over 10% of the stock in a week. A lot of people were. And unsurprisingly, if you're down 80%, you see you're getting, rolled back. A lot of people just threw in the towel, right? I wish they'd taken a closer look at the plan and our strategy, but we know who did most of the buying, right? So we know it's in good hands. But that's kind of how you expect to go with these things. It's never a low liquidity a ride to the top. There's always going to be sellers, and I think the tighter you can control the share registry, the easier it's going to be.
But you were essentially looking for serious investors with deep pockets, which makes sense that you didn't call me then in that case. I'm not going to take it personally though. How's talking about this? How's the relationship with Nexa and Buenaventura and now after kind of the restructuring here? Because I think they didn't come in on that financing, or they did. So yeah, what's the state of those?
So they didn't, which was fine, right? They both had individual circumstances, and they still have representatives on the board. We're very close with them. With neither was it a indictment that they didn't. In fact, with one of them, I sat down with them over lunch and made it pretty clear that you decide and don't feel stressed about it, which is to say that if don't feel like they need to support the company, because we had all the orders there. In fact, we had 35 million in orders within 2 days of announcing, right? So their order was not the difference between us succeeding in the financing or not, or being able to get the drill program done or not. I think there's close personal relationships with these companies and the Tinka management team, in particular Graham. And so I think, their support in the financing that was launched at the end of last year had a lot to do with wanting to support the company and wanting to support Graham. I think they felt maybe a little bit less pressure, right? So I think it's great. They're strong partners. They bring a lot of local knowledge, a lot of strategic value, and it's 2 very tight blocks. So I think they've been diluted down to maybe 13-14% now, right? But that's effectively a 30% block, between the 2 of them that's going nowhere. Another 40% from our new shareholders that's mostly, not going to go anywhere, right? So slowly but surely whittle away the free float.
We'll definitely talk about what you're going to do with that money, when the next time you're going to be raising, how you're going to do that. I do have it on my list here. We'll get to it. Just still doing the smell test here, if you will. Royalties. What's the royalty situation, and do any insiders personally own a royalty on any of these projects?
No, so the Iowoka project has a royalty that can be purchased outright, that is owed to a couple gentlemen who helped source the project for Tinka way back in the day. Now, the Sylvia project has a royalty due to BHP, because that's where we got it from in 2021. So BHP had done a large regional program looking for Antamina-like deposits. The Sylvia ground was some of the ground they owned. They were going to let it lapse. They were focusing their priorities elsewhere, and so they came to Tinka and said, look, if you pay the renewal and give us a royalty, it's yours, right? So it was a very, very low purchase price for a pretty compelling target, which was subsequently identified.
Mm-hmm. Still within our smell test and still talking about incentives, how do you look at spending money in the future, and how is specifically executive and director compensation going to be structured, as in what are your KPIs for determining it going to be?
Yeah, we don't have KPIs in place yet. I'll be completely honest with you, right? So I think part of what I'm trying to do is get this running like a $100 or $200 million company, right? Because I believe we'll get there. Now, you want to right size your bureaucracy and procedures in a company. You want to be very careful about, loading a company with really involved procedures when it doesn't have the market cap or spend to justify that, right? Because it just grinds everything to a halt. You need, part of the power of a, say, $5 million junior is extremely nimble and fast decisions, right? The ability to pivot on a dime. As you get bigger, you recognize those, and you got an actual going concern and things to do and a long-term plan. You got to be a little more procedure driven within that nimbleness. So your KPIs, what was the rest of the question? Sorry,
how do you think about spending money in the future? As in, how are you going to compensate executives and board members? Are you going to have a salary? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, so my salary is 150 CAD. I don't have any access to bonus or anything like that. That's a reflection of part-time, right? So my base salary was about twice that at Fireweed, plus I had a significant cash bonus potential every year. I didn't feel I needed that here. I wanted the salary to reflect that I wanted something, right? Because I'm exec, but nice. Thankfully, I cashed out of Fired with enough that I didn't, need to be hyper fixated on, getting the most salary possible. It was when I joined Fireweed, geez, that every penny, literally, we had to our name, we put into that company, right? So I had a lot of anxiety about what my salary was because that was how I lived. And, you know, that was in a very expensive town. You know, I feel a great privilege now that I don't have to look over my shoulder like that anymore. Yeah, and you know, Graham's on the same salary he was before. We haven't made any adjustments there, and we're, you know, have a modest director's fees. I think we're going to have a more structured approach in terms of KPIs and salaries and benchmarking, et cetera, through the comp committee put in place over the next sort of 6 to 8 months, and also building up to a structured medium and long-term budgeting process.
Do you think you're going to make any more changes in the meantime, like get a new CEO or anything like that? Is that the intention, or what kind of, you know, big changes do you want to make at kind of the corporate level, if you will?
I think we got to see how this goes, right? You know, part of what Michael and I really felt was that they were stuck in an exploration loop at Iowa. And this, you know, the third PEA, right? Not really a lot of progress forward. They improved the resource, improved the geological understanding of it, definitely added value. But, you know, we contrast that to someone like Adriatic, who just went, you know, hell-bent for production, right? It's certainly a risky approach as well, right? But we really felt that there was a high-grade core at Iowa and that we needed to progress towards that. Now, if we take that route, by Graham's own admission, he is an exploration geo. He's a very good exploration geo, but he's not a mine builder, right? So if we fully commit to the permitting, engineering, construction, you know, operations path, well, there'll be a, you know, transition there. And, you know, it's nice dealing with a management team and board that everyone recognizes that they are a piece of the puzzle, and it is an evolving puzzle. And so pieces get swapped in and out, right? That's fine, and it should be fine. And management that refuses, or boards that refuse to let go, are an obstruction to progress.
And to process. That is actually a nice slip up, but it's true. And I will get back to that because I do want to know how you're going to make that decision and when. So I'm writing down some stuff that we're going to get back to. But I think that about does it for the smell test. I want to go back to something else that you said at the beginning, but looking at the share price, you know, the Tinka share price over the last 5 years, it hasn't been great. Walk me through what happened there. You've obviously looked into it, but was there something wrong with a company? Was it that loop, or what are you going to be doing differently this time around to essentially not fall into that loop of, you know, falling share price again?
Yeah, like I said, everyone in the zinc space, all Fireweed and Tinka's peers, along with Fireweed and Tinka, crapped the bed in the latter half of 2018, right? And it was basically, you know, I mean, credit to Arizona Mining, who sold to South 32, who was the gold standard of zinc junior at that point in time. You know, that was 1.8 billion US they sold for in mid 2018. It must have been within 2 weeks of Trump, you know, announcing the trade wars, like literally, right? And the whole base metal complex had issues, and none bigger than zinc, right? Like economic slowdown kills base metal demand, right? You know, they're fundamentally tied to global economic health. So all of us, you know, Fireweed peaked at $2.14 in mid 2018. And then I think it was down to 60 cents by, you know, mid 2019, right? You know, it was, and then, I mean, 2020, we were down as far as 30 cents, right? When you know, the markets really, you know, had struggles during COVID. So it basically same thing happened to Tinka. A bit of, you know, momentum here and there. The introduction of, you know, Buenaventura, the Nexa helped. But I think a lot of the market wondered why there was 2 strategics and no bids for the project. You know, so that's, you bring in these strategics and then nothing happens with them. People start to think that maybe nothing going to happen, right? I guess, you can't, everyone has their own reason for selling. And unfortunately, selling begets selling, creates a bad chart, and that becomes a beast of its own, right? It's very hard to fight that chart. Everyone assumes there's something wrong. It's like, well, what's wrong is everyone's assuming there's something wrong. Right. So sometimes you just have to kind of flip the script, and that is not always easy to do. They clearly, I think, needed more capital markets help during that period. And I think that's what Michael Warner and I bring, right? And so we're hoping that now, we have a more cohesive, or are building a more cohesive strategy. We have an exec chair, another board member who have, deep experience in the capital markets and know how to, get some excitement behind a listed junior.
Well, to follow up on that, and also what you claim on a presentation on slide or page 3 in your presentation is where you say that you want to shorten the development pipeline to production. Mm-hmm. Yeah, is it you who'll be trying to bring this asset into production? Are you dead set on that, or will you be looking for an exit after, I don't know, potentially an updated resource or whatever it might be?
You can't force an exit, right? So everything we do to get this closer to production makes the project more saleable. Buying the surface rights, detailed metallurgy, detailed engineering studies, M&I, drilling to M&I in the critical zones, et cetera, right? All of these things make it easier for someone to purchase you, right? That is big box checking in terms of the major risks, right? Getting community agreements, et cetera, right? So these are all things that should make it easier for us to be purchased. If I was a betting man, I would be surprised if we built this, but at the same time, you take it that, well, someone's definitely going to buy us. It just leads to bad decision making, right? Which is maybe what had been done, right, over the last sort of 6 years, was like, we'll just keep building it bigger, and someone's going to have to buy us. And I don't think anybody has to do anything, right? So you want a daylight value, build it. And I think one of the things that, Michael and I really feel, and I think the board's bought into, including our strategic investors, is that, it doesn't have to be the biggest greenfields build. It doesn't have to be a greenfields build at all. I mean, we can pre-concentrate and toll mill or something at another semi-idle or idle mill within 100 kilometers, and there's quite a few around there. We can think about it not in terms of maximal NPV, but in terms of maximal NAV per share right now. Because those may not be the same thing, right? Because a maximal NPV study may require the most drilling to get the reserve conversion, may require the most time to do that, which means, more years discount till production, may require more complicated permitting, riskier permitting, et cetera. And then ultimately higher capital, which may be harder to finance and may have tougher financing terms. So a smaller NPV may actually be more value for current shareholders.
What would that's a good point, and I think we'll be back to as well. But what would a resource or an updated resource here have to look like in order for it to be of interest to a potential buyer? I guess both in terms of economics, but also in terms of size. I mean, is there a magic number for zinc?
No, I don't think so. Right, and I mean, I don't know what the imperatives of each potential acquirer are. Right, there's a project for sale near us, Raura, the Raura mine that's being sold by Minsur. There's significantly less than a decade of reserves there. I could see the final owner of that, which might be known before the end of this year, being quite interested in Iowilca. They may have a lot, if they're thinking, pre-concentration at Iowilca and trucking at 35 kilometers, which is not far, to the Raura mill, they may have a pretty low threshold to view Iowilca as interesting. Mm-hmm. Someone who has no assets in Peru and is thinking, we want to get a toehold in Peru, may need to see something pretty big to justify setting up the entire infrastructure of a, new country, right? So, everyone's going to be different. When we kind of raise the cutoff and we look at, the higher grade zones, which are regionally continuous in the west and south parts of Iowa, I'd like to see those about 50% bigger to get a good mine life at sort of a plus 12% zinc equivalent. I think is what I would like to see. That's a pretty great mine in Peru if you can do that, right? So I think drilling these big step outs into the low grade sort of distal zones allows you to build an inferred resource very quickly. I don't know that resource adds economic value, right? And so that's what we're really trying to focus on, is like maybe not be resource and NPV maximalist, maybe focus on, high grade, pragmatism, right?
You're a grade maxi. I can get behind that. What is it? What is the acid called there? Raura?
Raura, Raura.
Say that 5 times fast. That's a funny name. Yeah. What do you think, rough estimate, ballpark, how much money would you have to spend on it to get it, 50% larger than it is right now, those step outs that you mentioned? If I could give you a credit card with an exact number of, a dollar value on it right now, how much money would you want me to put on the credit card?
Good question, right? I've seen some comments on social media that our next drill program is going to double the resource, which is a real failure to look at how much drilling has been done to date, right? It's
no pressure though.
Yeah, so I think it's about 100,000 meters done to date or something like that. So to duplicate that would be, we're not going to do 100,000 meters this year. That's for sure. So that's a lot of drilling. I don't know. I don't. We're not going to accomplish that. Unlikely, based on my feeling about the resource, to accomplish that 50% in the next drill program. But I think we can get a good move on it. It's a possibility, right? I think if you have a good sense of where the high grade is and where it's extending. And if you find any more of these, high grade sort of pipes, you might be able to develop some high grade tons pretty quick. I mean, you're not talking about building another 30 million tons is 50% of everything, right? But if you're looking to add another 4 million tons of high grade, that may not require a ton of drilling, right? If you can really nail down your exploration and lock it in. So I don't know. My gut is 15 million, I guess, right? I don't know.
Is seasonal drilling there, right?
No, not Iowa. No. At Sylvia, the access at Sylvia is a bit harder. So the rainy season there would be a bit of an impediment to drilling. Whereas at Iowa, I think you could, if you really want to, drill year round. What's stopping us from getting into drilling at Iowa right now is that we want to renew our community agreements.
Right. And
we have one active, one just expiring, one that's lapsed a while back because we hadn't been drilling in that community's area. We'd like to get 2 or maybe all 3 renewed. They're all having elections late this year, so we'll be waiting till the elections are done to start those negotiations, which is why we are projecting a drill program starting in July, August at Iowa.
I'll definitely ask about the community relations. Important everywhere, definitely important in Peru as well. So we'll definitely get to that. But what I'm really thinking about here is, how much money is it going to cost you? How much time is it going to take you to get it to that, critical scale, de-risk it enough where it's interesting and large enough? 2 to 3 seasons. Does that sound reasonable?
I think we can do it faster than that. I think we can do it faster than that for sure. Okay. And like I say, interesting enough, it's very much in the eye of the beholder, right? This project's been close to M&A before, so I think that it's already there in the eyes of some people. And I think you might not need to drill it drill it off, as in define it to show that it's there, right? You have a handful of good high grade hits. And you convince a potential acquirer that it's there. Are they going to get FOMO? Are they really going to wait around for you to do what maybe, I mean, look, drilling from the first hits to a resource is never a foregone conclusion, right? Like it's never like, oh, sure, like we've got 3 hits, we've definitely got a, this is now we just like and it's done, right? It's like, no, it's not that simple. But companies can't get FOMO, right? And they can see like, well, if they keep getting hits like this, it's just going to get more expensive. And if it was already basically there, and the risk reward ratio, or is like, okay, well, we know there's more high grade, we just don't know how much. Maybe they move on it. But at the end of the day, like, we see an opportunity to, that doesn't really change our thoughts vis-a-vis design maybe too much, right? Like whether it's 10 or 15 year mine life, on a smaller high grade, really focused approach. So maybe we get stuck into permitting anyways, right? Like, start that clock, right? Get going.
Well, you could make that work if you're owned by the Chinese government. You could drill a hole here and then another hole, a kilometer down there, and then just block model and be like, we've got a 70, $100 billion gold deposit right here.
Yeah. Well, I've seen that. Geez, I get that from relatives all the time of like, oh, this country has discovered the biggest gold deposit in history. It's like, wow. Let's talk about that in a year's time, right?
How do you, 15 million bucks doesn't sound unreasonable at this market cap, but you still got to have a plan for financing. And would you just straight equity? Would you consider JV? Is there room for another strategic here next to Nexa and Buenaventura? How do you think about financing this company?
I mean, look, there's a right price for everything. Like, I think you recognize that a JV, it completely hamstrings your M&A options, right? Then you go one partner, and you're at their mercy in terms of how fast they go, and you can put all sorts of hooks into the contract to keep them honest, but you're still at their mercy mostly, right? So I don't love JVs. Junior major JVs don't often work out. I mean, look, exploration doesn't often work out, right? So I get, maybe that's just a truism no matter what the structure. I don't think, we know that some of our existing shareholders will re-up and grow their position, not just maintain it. So we see a path there in the equity markets, as long as the equity markets don't completely fall out, right? And I think this is one of your videos recently about, is this a true bull market? If it is, quality projects should not struggle to raise money, and the trick is going to be, are you building the book yourself with quality names, or are you going to a brokerage house that's doing a drive-by and is going to just fill it and churn it? Because there's lots of that in a bull market, right? And that's what separates the wheat from the chaff in management for sure.
How do you feel about warrants going forward? I mean, I saw some complaints online about the warrant structure being too cheap and too generous with the recent financing. So how do you plan on dealing with warrants in the future?
Well, those are our people, right? So, that was maybe the last time we issued warrants, right? In Fireweed, we issued warrants in 2020 only, right? The rest of the time I didn't. This one, to be completely selfish, I was coming in, right? I wanted aggressive terms. That was the cost of my involvement and the cost of, our initial placement. Now we're in, right? So now they're not negotiating against me. I'm negotiating for them. So I'm not super concerned about those warrants when I look at who they're held by. I think we're fine, right?
You don't think they kneecap, grow from here on out potentially just because of the pricing?
Oh, we're already well over the warrant price, right? I guess, they can't trade the warrants because we're more than 4 months over anyways, right? I would be surprised if there's much selling to ride the warrants. There'll be some, there always is, right? But even people who you swear are great shareholders, they were great shareholders for you once, they may not be a second time, right? You got to anticipate that. But I think you deliver, you produce good results, you keep the market informed. I think that problem is the least of your concerns.
What is the most of your concerns? What's the biggest risk for Tinka in the process of trying to get to that point? Is it geological, metallurgical, financial, community, something else?
macroeconomic would be probably the biggest risk for every junior right now, right? And that's, like I said, that's universal, right? You look at what happened to Tinka and Fireweed in 2018, could happen again, right? Like there's a lot of tariffs right now, right? So precious metals are doing well, base metals, okay, right? Considering the amount of tariffs and trade frictions being introduced right now. Base metals could rip if, the tariffs all evaporate and we're back to a, more freer trade environment. I think there's lots of geological and engineering risk at Iowa. I mean, obviously, huge amount of geological risk at Sylvia, right? This has never been drilled, right? So great trenches do not always equate to great drill results. Sometimes they do, and that's what we're hoping for. So big geological risk there. Iowa may not have a lot of, more fruit to bear in terms of high grade, right? So our thesis may not play out that way. We feel it does, but you can be wrong. And yeah, community. We've pretty good relationship with the community. They seem pro project. All 4 communities we deal with, 1 at Sylvia and 3 at Iowa, all seem they want agreements, they want the project forward, they want jobs, etc. But these things can pivot, right? So they can change. It can take a turn. You can get an election that goes against you, and anti-development or anti-mining people come in. It's the reality. So, and in small communities like that, it's very personality driven. I mean, it is in countries as well. You look what's happening in the U.S. There's a big change based on one personality. But in communities, it's like, you might have 200 people you're dealing with, right? So it's like literally one person can sway and, his family and extended family, and suddenly, it's not the same as it was before. So, you have to put in the hard yards there. I feel pretty good about Iowa's metallurgy and engineering, etc. Right? Yeah, I would say what keeps me up. So to kind of recap, what keeps me up most of the night is just macroeconomic. It's one of those rare projects that I'm like, okay, yeah, I like it. Feels like we can build a mine here, right? Like not without challenges, because it's a challenging industry, but it feels like we're there, right? Which is a great position to be in.
I think to make the community thing happen, you might have to change your Twitter handle from Yukon Brandon to Peru Brandon. That's
right. Yeah.
That's gonna be the thing pulling them over the line. How far are you from any agriculture or any other potential areas of life that you might disturb with this project, either during exploration or mining?
Oh, well, there's little hamlets, etc. Like these little tiny mini villages on the project and around the area and stuff like that. So, there's a good risk that you disturb people, right? And, do they, is there a price that makes them happy that allows them to set up, their little farm elsewhere? This we had to figure out. The communities themselves are far enough away that they would not be directly impacted. And I think there's a way to, honestly, to truck the concentrate out that isn't having to go right through these communities as well. So I think that, it's not going to be a massive disruption to anyone, I don't think.
What do community consultations look like for you? I mean, have you been there already, talked to the people, and what is that actually going to look like? If you've not done it yet, once you do it.
I haven't, right? I mean, they probably don't speak much English, and my Spanish is limited, very limited. I've done work in Latin America enough that there was a time when I was, I would say, functional in Spanish. I could get around if there was nobody that spoke English. I wasn't going to starve to death or anything like that, right? But I was never talking about my hopes and dreams or certainly doing detailed negotiations in Spanish.
You're just like Don de Estela Discoteca, and that was basically it, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Also, even Graham, for the most part, we have community people. stays out of the discussions a bit. Because in the event, like the discussion goes kind of south, if the CEO and chairman are involved in it, there's no one to go above that, right? So, keeping it one step removed so that you can escalate, I think is valuable. And so far that escalation hasn't been needed.
Mm-hmm. How's power in the region now for exploration, but also, again, thinking about a potential mining scenario? What kind of upgrades are needed?
Well, there's a big power line through the project. Look at the photos. You'll see it. And actually, there's a subsidiary of Tinka that's set up that owns power rights there, right? So we actually have the rights to that power already, which is one. Coming from being in the middle of nowhere in Yukon to somewhere like, oh, there's the high voltage power line. And we've got a right to the power. Like that's what a what a change, right?
Yeah. All the more reason to change your name to Peru, Brandon, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah.
You say big power line. How big is it? I mean, is it mining power? I mean, it's because you need larger infrastructure essentially if it's going to be a mining operation.
This may be above my pay grade, but I'm pretty sure there is a substation 4 kilometers away, and I'm just looking it up here, but I don't know what exact.
4 is better than 400.
Anything. Yeah, and then the power lines themselves do go right over the project.
Right.
I don't know what voltage they are. They looked pretty material to me. Like they're not like, power a subdivision sort of power lines. Like they're beefy.
You went there yourself before that. I think you've been to the project multiple times. How's security? I mean, when you step on the ground, do you need like an escort, whatever?
No. We drove there without escort, without anything like that, and I'd stopped in the communities and talked to some people, and on site there was no need for anything like that. I don't this doesn't seem like a part of Peru where that's a big concern. That perhaps that could change, right? But at least now it's been pretty safe. I've worked in places where I did not feel safe, like very much, and I've been in when I was in Colombia, some villages that just felt weird. I don't know how to describe what you were even seeing that felt weird. It was just something about it felt weird. And I got none of that vibe at all, right? I was getting out of the vehicle. My presence was unremarkable. Nobody seemed to care, right? So I think that's a good indication.
Yeah, you've worked in Vancouver too. And I think Michael's in London, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. There you go. We'll talk about the interest places. How's water? What's the water situation there? Who's got the rights? Is there enough water? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the water rights. There is pretty healthy rainfall seasonally there. I know that for the drilling, at least, they have a couple big ponds that they collect water in so they can drill in the dry season. What that means for production in the dry season, I'm not sure. I could certainly chase that down. But it's, then in terms of the negative sides of water, the water table is mostly below, I think it's entirely below the west deposit, or at least the important parts of the west deposit, and halfway down the south deposit, which is good. The less you have to drain, the better.
Yeah. Topography might be worth touching upon as well. What does that look like where you are?
Well, it's interesting. It's a bit of a plateau, the project. Not that it's completely flat, but I would say it's kind of like rolling hills, which you'll see in the photos. But then you kind of go a little bit away and then it drops off pretty sharply, right? These big limestone cliffs, etc. there. So the last 3 kilometers of driving, you do quite a bit of switchback to get up there. Then once you're up there, it's kind of just rolling hills. So lots of room for infrastructure up on the plateau for sure.
But you can drive the rig up there then. You don't have to fly it in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what you have going on right now, because you're going to be drilling soon, I believe.
Yeah,
When
it's Sylvia. I mean, imminent. The rig is being, I mean, has been mobilized. Like
okay,
they've got it all to site, and I don't know exactly when drilling starts, but it'll be soon.
that's your gold copper target.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a very different beast. There's no road to that, so that was a production to get that drill in.
Right. What are you paying per meter drilled, or what are you going to be paying per meter drilled?
For Sylvia, it's going to end up being around $1,000, which is pretty expensive. But that's because it's a small program and because there's been so much work establishing the trail to the drill site and getting the drill up there and all the bits and bobs for the drill. I think it's probably, that's about I want to say 1.2 million US program for 1,500 meters, thereabouts. I suspect it's probably about, which make you say about $800 per meter or something like that. I suspect it's probably about $400 a meter, plus $600,000 in costs of getting established there, right? So I think our subsequent programs there are going to be a lot cheaper. We're also looking to amend the permit there to allow for the use of helicopters, because of the way we did it now, I mean, it was good for community engagement because we employed a lot of people. It was a lot of manually getting stuff up to the Sylvia project. So I think we had up to 40 or 50 people from the Tupac village employed there.
Mm-hmm. The village called Tupac?
Yeah, Tupac something, I don't know what it is. Yeah, I was like, interesting. Yeah.
It's a fan base, maybe. I'll look it up. I actually didn't know that. What is how many holes do you want to do? What's the average depth?
3 or 4 holes to probably 400 or 500 meters. Like, we're not going to stop a hole if it's well mineralized or otherwise interesting. But the rigs, these are man portable rigs. Interestingly, I've used these same rigs in Yukon because they were designed to be man portable or broken down into small enough bits that you could use a lighter weight helicopter to move them. Because the rigs we were using at Fireweed in heli program there were pretty beefy rigs, so you needed a pretty beefy helicopter to move the heavy bits of it. Whereas these rigs, the heaviest bits of it can still be moved by like a Hughes 500, like a much lighter helicopter. Where was I going with this? Anyway, so the point is we're not going to go like super deep. Even if the hole was well mineralized at 500, 600 meters, that may be tapping out the drill rig. Look, if it's still well mineralized that deep, man, that's a great problem to have. But we'll see.
First time you're drilling there, though, or like in the history of the company, right?
Well, history of the project, yeah.
Yeah. What is? I was just thinking, how long is it going to take you to drill that first hole and then get it to market? Because I was trying to understand how ground conditions might be, and what kind of drilling efficiencies you might get per day.
I would say it's probably 3 weeks per hole. So if we start it next week, maybe done at October 15th or November 15th, something like that.
Yeah.
And then if we can get results inside of a month, that would be great. So look, I think there's a chance, we have something to say. I mean, there's a chance. I am a fan of, and I honestly I hope it's not speaking out of turn because I haven't talked to Graham about this, but I am a fan of talking about visuals. You have to be careful there because you can be very misleading, right? And I don't think you want to be misleading. So I think you want to really stress the uncertainty that goes from visuals to assays. But at the same time, if you have a hit or even a not hit or something like that, that's a long time to be in possession of material information and not, release it. On the ASX, I think if something material happens, you have 3 days to get it out, right? So they're basically forced to do visuals. So I see the value of both. I certainly see the value of we're not going to talk about it until, we have the full assays. At Fireweed, we liked the approach of, every time we had a news release during the program, we would talk about the drill holes we completed to date, and we had a very simple description of the holes, right? Like wide mineralized zone encountered. It might have been like only that, right? So people knew what holes it hit and missed, and at least it cleared the air on the misses completely, right? Very quickly. But yeah, so I guess there's a possibility that we have something to say sooner rather than later. I'm certainly hoping we do, right?
But in terms of assays, then hole by hole, does that make sense?
I guess, yeah. I guess if there's 3 weeks between them, it might just end up being that way, right?
Yeah. But you should still be able to get it out before the end of the year, at least one hole. Just looking at.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, I don't know what the status of labs are in Peru, but I would think that's possible.
Are there a lot of labs where you are, or would you have to?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we're not that far from Lima, right? Like it's I guess actually, as the crow flies, there's kind of two roads on Sylvia, and our access is through the north one, which I think requires us to go quite a bit farther north before coming back around. But all the same, even if it's a couple days to the lab, that's not the major bottleneck, right? Yeah. It's not 2 weeks to get to the lab.
How would you define success from this program? I mean, it's first pass drill program, so are you looking for minimums, like minimum grades, widths, geometry, something else that you want to see in the core here?
Yeah. So, there was a trench across this skarn outcrop at Sylvia in the valley there. And across the samples across this trench averaged 1.9 grams gold and 0.8% copper over 46 meters of trenching, right? I would be delighted to get that in a drill hole. Absolutely tickle pink to get that in a drill hole, right? So there are a variety of reasons that a trench can misrepresent what's underneath, higher or lower, but geological variability, right? You can have mechanical enrichment of the gold or something like that, or supergene enrichment or something of the copper. Like there's a whole variety of reasons it could be overstated or understated. We'd like to see, extensive skarn mineralization. We'd like to see grades that are encouraging. There's definitely not been enough geophysics done in this project. The reason we're jumping into drilling is exactly because of that sample, the trench across this outcrop. That's compelling enough that it felt like we should put some holes into this, right? If we get something that's like, I don't know what the grade width is, but if it seems to hold up to those sort of 40-ish meter thickness, and we're seeing at least spotty bits of good copper and good gold. It may not be all the way across it, but we're seeing little bits of it that are good. That to me is encouraging, right? Because we don't know how far we are from the source intrusion. We do not know if this is the best part of the skarn system. So what I want to see is like, okay, it looks to be a reasonable size skarn system, and it is at least locally carrying grade. That I think is a major victory. The market, of course, wants to see bonanza, right? Hey, look, if we hit that in our first drill program, we'll act like we knew it was going to happen, even though, of course, we didn't, right? But that would be a great outcome. But yeah, I think we're definitely. I don't know how it could be so bad that we wouldn't still come back here with some geophysics. But I think anything that's, if we get any sort of intersections of 10 meters of plus of good grade, I'd be like, okay, all right, no, this is real, right? We may not be at the guts of it, but this is real.
Could it be good enough that you're like, I want to spin it out? This needs to be its own company raising its own capital.
Yeah, that's actually been a big discussion is do we spin this out? I think that's definitely a measure twice, cut once situation. We've actually recently acquired some ground in between Sylvia and Iwilka. Amazingly, they're close enough and the ground was open for us to connect them, which is good because it allows you to, under some laws, consider them the same project, right? Which is useful if one's in production, the other's not. So that'd be a reason to not spin it out, because then you've lost that edge. But it is different markets. One's a mature, progressing to production zinc project. Another is a exploration, big risk reward story, copper gold, right? So I can certainly, and I think likely different suitors for each.
Yeah. That's kind of where I was coming from with this. And again, it's results dependent, I suppose. I mean, if there's no major grade there, it might make it tough for that company to raise capital on its own. So you might still need to push it a bit forward. Why was it never drilled? I mean, you say you're going to do the first drill program on the project ever. How come?
So it's pretty rugged, remote terrain, right? I don't think there've been a lot of prospecting done there. Rio had done some mapping there. BHP had done some mapping there. They'd done some geophysics. They hadn't really sampled this outcrop that we did. So they were looking for an antimina. The intrusions they found here, as I understand, were the wrong age. So even though it was the right limestone, they found the wrong age intrusion. So they became less interested. At the end of the day, this was part of a big regional program for BHP. So you can't keep every bit of ground. You just can't, right? Like a big regional program, you really need to pick where you're going to focus, because you can't do focused work on, 5,000 square kilometers or something like that, right? I don't know if it was that big, but my point. So they gave it up, right? And we got it pretty cheap. And the more detailed work that the Tinka team did has identified something material. And I think there's like different target areas, each one which have different interests. It seems quite likely that there's a buried intrusion there, and it could be a porphyry target there as well, right? This is the Andes. It's a good reason to think there could be a good porphyry in the area, right? Doesn't mean there is. So we see there's more work to be done for sure. But when we looked at it, I think of like all sorts of companies that have drilled, good discoveries based on an outcrop. That's a pretty good place to start. The reality is that we're increasingly in a world where you're not starting with a good outcrop, right? Because the good outcrops, unless there's something they're really hard to get to, dangerous, or something like that, or have just been revealed because of ice retreat or something like that. There's not a lot of screaming outcrops just sitting out there begging to be drilled, right? So more and more, companies are not rushing into these drill programs because they can't. They've got, deep seeing geochemistry and geophysics, et cetera, to really figure out what their target should even be. We have some idea where this buried intrusion is here, but I can't go drilling it. We like some idea is still a needle in a haystack, even for something as big as an intrusion, right?
Yeah.
So, there needs to be some IP or something there to figure out where would we even target that drill hole? How deep are we targeting? What type of drill do we bring in? Could we do it with these little drills, or do we have to bring in something beefy, right? So I think we're lucky. We feel very lucky that at least our first drill program here, we've got some stuff at surface that runs really well, right? So, and that it seems to be a gold dominant system, right? You've got up to an ounce of gold in grab samples, right? So that should be interesting.
What's elevation here again?
So 4,500, I want to say, around Sylvia. I mean, give or take, right? It's in a pretty good sized valley there. So, top or bottom, I'm not sure what the difference is, but 4,500-ish.
What about Iowilca?
Similar. Yeah, I want to say Iowilca is about, the plateau, I want to say, is about 4,000 to 4,300-ish.
Okay. When are you...
I mean, am I exactly right there? No, but it's about that.
No, that's fine. My ballpark is fine. Why not drill them at the same time?
Oh, you mean Iowilca?
Yeah.
We're not ready, right? We're not ready. We don't, first off, we got a lot of desktop studies to do at Iowilca to understand exactly what we want to do and where. I am going from first principles on Iowoka, and it's not out of a lack of respect for the work that's been done, but I just think sometimes you have to go back to the beginning and say, let's rebuild our case here. Let's make sure we understand this, and they're on board for that. Second, more important reason is we got to redo our community agreements, right? And that's starting. Really, the effort on that starting reasonably soon, but I wouldn't expect those to be signed until Q2 2026, right?
Yeah. But I mean, still, because you said Iowoka is not seasonal, so you could be drilling this in our summer, their winter.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not going to cost you more?
No. I was there. I'm in August, and it was. They were remarking on how there was snow the day before, like that was a big deal, and it was gone. But by the time we got there, in fact, it was probably gone by that afternoon. It is not like. It's not high enough altitude, given how close to the equator it is, to have material snowfall. It was, I had a light jacket on while touring in the dead of winter, right?
Switching gears here, maybe a little bit, but you've also recently acquired a 5% carried interest in a company that holds a gold project in Saudi Arabia. Kind of out of the blue. I wouldn't have expected it. I wouldn't have it on my bingo board. What's the thinking?
Yeah, well, what the thinking was, and this was before Michael and I approached Tinka. Graham was in Riyadh for a conference, and I think met some locals who wanted to get involved in a tender process to bid on a gold project in Saudi Arabia, and they lacked the expertise to do it, and so they effectively contracted Tinka to pick the project they bid on. And help them design the program to be run on it. So I understand why Graham did it. He wouldn't do it again now because at that point, Tinka was in a very tough spot. They needed the money. This was paying. This helped keep, bring money into Tinka. It wasn't a lot. It was $250 US a year, I want to say, right? But it was something. And he otherwise might have had to lay off his geological workers or team, right? So this is like, okay, well, it keeps them busy. It means they're cost neutral. They can do, the mapping and everything for the stuff in Saudi. And so for Tinka, it was a little bit of money coming in and a carried interest in the project, right? So it made sense at the time. And we're not going to go dropping it or anything like that. We're going to keep our involvement there. It is a super low bandwidth thing for us to do, right? Which is why Graham took it on. But would I do it again now? No, I wouldn't. I don't think it makes sense. It made sense in the context of where Tinka was at the time.
So is it going to cost you any money, time, effort, or anything else to manage it at all?
No. In fact, it brings money in, right? So we'll until we stop being carried, which I don't remember exactly what the threshold is there. It's still a few years out yet. It doesn't cost us anything.
And you're also then, I'm assuming, you're not planning any more of this kind of deals anymore. You're just going to focus on what you have at Iowoka and Sylvia, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, never say never, right? Like I think sometimes things just land in your lap and you're like, oh, geez, we should do this, right? Did Faroe need a tungsten project? No, right? But that turned out to be a pretty good move, right? So you got to be opportunistic and you got to say, okay, what is the value in this being in Tinka? And is there something specific about Tinka that makes this project more valuable in this company than another company? And if something like that landed on our lap, then yeah, we jump on it, right? We're not actively looking, but we're always open-minded.
Couple of housekeeping notes here. G&A, what do you think that's going to be? Do you have a rough estimate of where you want it?
Management salaries plus what de minimis rent and bookkeeping and that sort of stuff. I want to say it's about $1 million US a year.
Okay. That include marketing?
No, I would say marketing. This is actually, we're having an open discussion right now, but what do we want to spend on marketing? I want to pencil in about $500,000 a year. I don't know if that's too much or not enough, right? Like I've spent significantly more than that before. Marketing, it's very easy to waste money. But when a market's hot, marketing is more effective. That's just the reality, right? And in a bad market, none of your marketing partners have stroke. None of them. They can't do anything for you, right? It's like, I don't know, pay them if you want. That's probably not doing you much good. In a hot market, even the least competent marketing partners can generate something often, right? Because it's just eyeballs, eyeballs, eyeballs. When Joe Retail, Joe Main Street Retail is talking about needing to buy a zinc company, then anything that gets your name out there is good, right? So I don't think we're there yet, but I do think we need to carefully, increase our marketing spend.
What do you want to spend it on? Are you thinking kind of a similar mix as to what you were doing at Fireweed, or are you going to change something, bring something new in?
Yeah, pretty similar mix, right? I think a bit more digital material, videos, etc. Webinars, stuff like that. A bit more travel. I think we're lucky that Graham and I and even Michael a bit can divide and conquer a bit the jurisdictions. I'm able to travel for a couple companies now, which cuts the cost, right? If you'll be at Deutsche Goldmesse, I'll probably be presenting for two companies, right? So that's and then I'm lucky that Will Slack from Enduro will be there to take the Enduro meetings, and I'll probably take the Tinka meetings. So there's ways to kind of cut down there. But yeah, it's like I don't, no big aggressive newsletter campaigns or digital blasts or anything like that planned. I have done those in the past, and at the time I didn't know. I didn't realize how hot money it was, right? And I'm, I don't feel bad. We didn't say anything misleading or anything like that, right? But we talk about shareholder quality. Sometimes if you really try to overspend on marketing, a quick chart move can be your own worst enemy, because your long and loyal shareholders will sell because it's too much, and then you have to convince them to buy back, and they often won't. They've gone on to something else, right? If you doubled by going up 2%, every day for 2 months or whatever, you probably wouldn't shake out any of those loyal shareholders. But if you go up if you double in 2 days on no news, a lot of those people will flake out, right? And why not, right? It's probably how I would trade it.
More travel, is that you speaking, or does the wife just want to have you out the house again?
No, well, I'm trying to, I don't know what year it was that I did the most travel, but it was 120 days on the road. I am not aiming for that. I don't think that was valuable. Although I was hitting a lot of different things, there is retail marketing, there is engaging with funds, there is, I had gone to Japan and China a few times to engage with corporates there, which is a bit of a different beast. But I think for the company, you have to front load it. Maybe this year is going to be a bit more, and then we kind of come down afterwards, because you can follow up with people more often on Zoom. But I think that it is tough to make a meaningful connection with someone on Zoom when it's your first time meeting them. I've heard the expression, it takes 3 touches to make someone a contact. And I don't think digital touches count much, right? I don't think they do. I think you need to meet them in person a couple times at least for them to feel like they know you. And I think them feeling like they know you and legitimately knowing you makes their purchasing decision easier.
Well, having seen those fancy shoes of yours a couple of times, I feel like I know you. So if that's any feedback, there you go.
Yeah.
What do you
impulse bought in Portugal? Yeah.
Can you talk to me maybe a little bit about your and I don't know if you can or not. So about your relationship with the Lundins. I mean, are they a potential? Is there a synergy here? What would they go back to doing something with you again? How did that kind of develop once you left Fireweed?
Yeah, I mean, I still talk to Adam occasionally. I talk to Harry Lundin more at the Broma Fund. Mm-hmm. I think that I mean, I would say time heals all wounds. It wasn't really that much of a wound. Like I understood that there was going to be a change anyways, right? So, yeah, look, one of the things for sure is that even if I had like some sort of insane grudge, right? Like, does that serve me or does that serve the company? And it would not, right? And so you have to, recognize that business is business. And you want to succeed maximally over your entire career, which means not burning any bridges, and particularly not burning any bridges for anything as petty as, having your nose at a joint about something, right? So, yeah, I can see, that this is certainly if there's success at Sylvia, even Iowoka, this is could be a potentially interesting project for them, both as investors and acquirers, right? So you always keep the communication lines open, and I mean enough that when I'm going to DGM, dropping in on London first, but also going to Stockholm and catching up with some of the network there that I built when I was working for a Lundin company, and I think it's still a good reception when I'm there.
Are you going to ask them to sign the book?
It's already signed. Yeah. So Robert, yeah. I actually got my book directly from him, so he signed it. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Need.
What's the most? I'm about to let you go because I know you almost have to run here. What's the most fair criticism of Tinka that you've heard since you joined the company?
I think people were right that the company was a bit listless, right, without direction. I think it was fair that. It should have been dealt with. I mean, Sentient's end of fund was not a surprise, right? This was a known thing for years and years and years, right? Like this is like the end of fund date, right? These things are published. Could have been dealt with, right? I mean, look, if there's no takers for it, there's no takers for it, but that's tough, right? Like whenever a company with legitimate asset has that type of chart over multiple years, I think that it is fair to ask, or to say that something was done wrong. I think Graham is a tremendous geologist. He is a tremendous geologist, and his expertise has been demonstrated time and time again in the success they've had at Iowoka. You look at the resource there. I don't think that is up for debate. He knows he's not a market guy, and he knows he's not a mine builder. So it's recognizing those blind spots and bringing in help, right? And I think that's the board's made the right decision. They've brought in that help.
What's the most fair criticism of me? What do you wish I would have asked or done differently? Forgetting something to ask or something to cover here?
Oh, most fair criticism of you. Yeah, geez, I don't know.
There's too many. You pull up a list like in the cartoons.
We're both wearing the sweaters, right? So I didn't wear my beige one, but maybe your sweater's too tight. Is that a fair criticism?
That's fair. No, that is fair. Brandon, thank you so much.
I guess the question is you're doing a good job on highlighting conflicts of interest, etc. Right? And I guess it's an open question. Does your audience even want a deeper dive on geology and technical stuff, which is probably out of your depth, right? And I do see people interview asking questions that are out of their depth, right? And it's like okay, they asked a tough question, but if they can't understand the answer, what's the point? Clearly someone's asked them that question. I mean, I think you solicit questions in advance of this, right?
Partly. I mean, the option is there, so people can go to resourcetalks.com. At the bottom of the page, there's an announcement of the next interviews, and people can put in questions that they might want to ask. I do like doing deeper dives on geology, and don't get me wrong, I've been out of my depth throughout this conversation. I had to spend at least an hour in the mirror pretending that I know what I'm talking about. And it happens in geology too, but at least not understanding everything kind of, I suppose, brings it closer, because I can, I get to ask questions and to try to actually understand it myself. And if I'm understanding it, 99% of people are. So I'd love to do that. I mean, if we can get Graham on and yourself and just talk through everything, a geo deep dive might be helpful.
Yeah, I think particularly if there's some success or, I mean, whatever the outcome at Sylvia, I think it'd be great to talk about the rationale of the program and the results and what it means.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Brandon. Really appreciate your time and hopefully speak to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks very much.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they're necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias. Again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should under no circumstances be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. So unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find a company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the management information circular, the financial statements, the management discussion and analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."